where did the word relationship come from?
Well, it's probably just because I'm thinking too far ahead a little bit and talking to the students in the class and writing on the whiteboard. So I'm writing relationship, and I've started with Revelation, and I'm thinking relationship. So I started Revelation, and then I put ship up there because my mind is racing ahead. I said, oh, look at that. Well, that kind of summarizes what I'm trying to say.
Kind of a fluke.
Yeah, kind of a fluke. It was a fluke in a way, but it turned out. And so, the students said, oh, yeah, that's kind of good.
That's kind of good. Let's go with that.
Yeah,
Let's go with
exactly.
That. Kind of made up a word, and yet it ended up being a real word. So what happened was, the backstory is, I had been studying the dry and dusty and sort of bloodthirsty pages of the Old Testament, and it was 10 years ago, and it occurred to me that if I would switch my mindset and search for all the ways that God revealed himself, and I got that from the searching for Aslan. What I learned from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and several of the books is that every time they go ahead of Aslan, every time they act without looking first for Aslan, they mess up. People die. There's wars that
disaster.
It's a disaster upon disaster. But if they would just look for Aslan, and that was drilled into me from those books, we should look for Aslan. So I thought, well, let me look for all the ways that God is revealing himself in these dry and cough, Exodus, Deuteronomy pages. And so I started in Genesis, and Genesis, I found this living God who broods over the water, who creates, who spins things, who remembers things, who sets up reminders, who sees us, who calls us, who leads angel armies, who does all these amazing things. And he constantly is saying, I am the God who does these things. And so my eyes were completely opened to all the ways. And this was just Genesis. And there's more revelations of God in the first 2 chapters of Genesis than the rest of the Old Testament. It's an enormous amount packed in to a small amount of space. And so I was sharing that with you. You had me share it to the interns, and then you were summarizing it, and you wrote Revelation on the whiteboard, and accidentally, happy accident, wrote Revelationship.
Yeah, I think that was part of the God Who series that you've been working on.
Yes, which is coming out later.
Yeah.
It's a different way of studying the Bible. And so far, everyone who I've shared it with, for them, it makes the Old Testament come alive again, too.
I think one of the mistakes that people make often today is they read through the Old Testament and they think or assume that every action that's taken by the heroes of the Old Testament is necessarily condoned by God.
Right.
Or that he approves, their action or everything that they did. Or he may have said that they were to do one thing and they take it to an extreme,
right,
or too far, or something like that. So people are often looking at the actions of humankind versus really trying to have relationship or to understand who God is.
Those things faded.
Yes.
The things that kind of could be a little troublesome faded because I was looking for God revealing himself in the stories. And there's some really flawed individuals. I mean, Abraham is a really flawed individual. He does...
Most are.
Yeah. I mean, he fails.
David was,
right.
all of these heroes.
Abraham fails every test until he gets it right.
Yeah.
Which is a lesson, I guess, in itself. But it's not really, like you're saying, it's not prescriptive.
Right.
It's really meant to reveal God at work, doing something from the very beginning.
Despite our flaws.
Despite our flaws.
Yeah.